Good morning. Welcome to the Monday, November 4th, 2024 meeting of the Needham Board of Assessors. First item on the agenda is I have an announcement to make, and my name is John Bullion. I'm the chair of the Board of Assessors. In accordance with the open meeting law at the beginning of the meeting, I must disclose to attendees whether the meeting is being recorded. This meeting is being broadcast via Zoom and is being recorded for publication, later viewing, and administrative purposes. Also, after notifying the chair, any person may make a video or audio recording of the meeting or may transmit the meeting through any medium subject to reasonable requirements of the chair as to the number, placement, and operation of equipment used so as not to interfere with the conduct of the meeting. Please let me know now so that I can make that announcement as well. I see we have no visitors in attendance, so we will move to the next item. The public comment period. Is there anybody on Zoom? I don't see anybody, and there's nobody here in the room.
No one's raising their hand.
Okay. We do not have minutes to approve from a prior meeting, so we'll move back right into open session, taxpayer appointments. I have not been advised of any.
No taxpayer appointments, Mr. Chair.
Okay, then we'll go to Pace. And turn that over to.
Me, Gabby Queenan.
And again, with the benefit of everybody, you can introduce yourself.
Yes. Sure. Hi, everyone. I'm Gabby Queenan. I am the sustainability manager for the town. If you haven't heard of me, it's because I've only been here for about a year. Hopefully we'll get to work together more though. So I am, that one. Thank you. I'm here to give a brief presentation about a program that's offered in Massachusetts.
Yeah, Gabby, before you start, let me just go around because I don't, we don't know you. So I'm John Bullion. Mike Dean.
Michael Knight.
Marie Northam. You know, wait.
Chip Davis.
Okay,
Great.
proceed.
Okay, thank you.
It should be sharing now.
Click there. Great. So this is my intention is just to give you a sense of some of the basics about this program. This is a program that we are considering for the town, and at this point we're interested in getting questions, ideas for additional information that might be needed, things like that, so we can fully evaluate whether or not this is a good program to adopt in Needham. So the program is the Property Assessed Clean Energy, or PACE, Massachusetts program. So basically what this program does is it's kind of an innovative financing mechanism that allows for commercial and industrial property owners to finance energy improvements for their buildings via special betterment assessments on their property tax bills. So when we say energy improvements, that means things like energy efficiency, so insulation, air sealing, improvements to HVAC systems, but it also means renewable energy as well. So things like adding solar panels or doing ground source heat pumps, things like that. And so this program has been adopted in almost every state in the US at this point. And there's some pretty compelling reasons why states are interested in this. For municipalities, it's an opportunity to attract new businesses, retain existing businesses who might want to make those improvements and are looking for another funding mechanism. There's the environmental and cost benefits that are associated with reducing energy consumption. For property owners, they're attracted to this as an opportunity to look at a long-term financing mechanism. There's no payoff upon the sale of property. The assessments run to the new owner, so that's attractive as well. For lenders and mortgage holders, these capital improvements are helping to increase property value. And for them, it's a way to reduce credit risk, improve their cash flow from lower operating costs as well, with a financing mechanism that cannot be accelerated. So in Massachusetts, we decided to add this program back in 2020. So it's still relatively new. And we set it up so that Mass Development is the program administrator for the program. And that's done in consultation with the Massachusetts Department of Energy Resources, or DOER. The legislature did make some changes to this program back in 2023, specifically to make explicit that new construction of properties would be eligible for this program as well. So in terms of flow of funds, so capital providers are financing improvements that a property owner has identified that they'd like to do, and then they are getting paid via a betterment assessment. The property owner is installing those energy improvements and continues to pay into the betterment assessment. The municipality is responsible for billing and collecting the betterment assessment. And then the paying agent is receiving and then dispersing the betterment assessment.
Excuse me, I
Candy.
don't know if this is coming up, but can you just give like a maybe this is coming up next, but
Mm.
just an example of what a typical one would be and how this would work?
Yeah, sure. We are gonna do a couple of examples.
Okay.
Like an example would be, if a property wanted to add solar panels, for example. They'd go to the list of capital providers. There's 17 right now that Mass Development has approved. So I'd go to them and they'd say, hey, we'd like to do this project. Assuming they meet all the criteria that Mass Development has set up for PACE. That would get approved. Say it's like a $300,000 project. The max term length for that project, for that financing is 20 years. So over those 20 years, they'd set up an assessment, a betterment assessment for the value of that project. So assuming it's a very large solar array, it's $300,000. So they would set up what the period would be for repayment. It's usually 2 cycles for each year. And then they'd spread that over that time. Mass Development has designated MuniCap as the entity that's responsible for supporting municipalities with setting up their changes to their billing system to account for this. So there's going to be an addition for each bill cycle. So I think we have 4 bill cycles.
We have a quarterly billing system,
Okay.
and it would work that the betterment would be charged with the first quarter and with the third quarter bill.
Okay.
Important, you didn't ask it, it's no local dollars that are being used to finance this program.
Well, I was gonna ask, I got.
Yeah, I was gonna say.
Well, I wanna,
We've got-
if you have an
we'll try-
example coming up, I'll do that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'll wait until you have it, but
I do have-
otherwise, I do wanna go through it more.
Let's
thoroughly.
sort of interject some
Yeah.
questions, but as you go along, Gabby, and I know if you tell us we're gonna get to that,
Yeah.
you can say
Yeah.
that, but I have some too.
You say that it's not on the balance sheet. I'm assuming it's recorded with the deed.
It does have to be recorded with the Registry of Deeds, and the state is responsible for doing that recording.
Okay, and I'm not sure about other betterments, but isn't it still a debt and it would be considered a liability on the property?
It's considered a lien on the property, basically. So the capital provider is the one who's kind of like on the hook for
Right.
that. So if we ever had an issue with a property owner paying their betterment assessment or even paying their taxes, for example, because they're getting this assessment as part of their tax bill, the way we are gonna get to this in a little bit of a
Okay.
later slide, but the municipal dollars always come first. So anything that the town is owed is a priority for repayment before the betterment assessment, because that's considered a state program.
And then the betterment is before any other people in line on the
Yes,
deed.
so it goes municipal, PACE, and then any private dollars that are owed.
So this isn't.
I wasn't done.
Oh, sorry,
I'm speaking.
I'm sorry, I didn't even see you.
I'm speaking.
This is I, sir.
So I guess, and I'm not an accountant, so you'll have to bear with me. How would it be off the balance sheet if it's not? If it's still a debt?
I'm not sure I understand.
Well, it said earlier,
It's not a liability of the community. it's still gonna be a liability for the private entity.
Oh, okay, see, I was looking at it from the private
Yeah.
entity. Okay,
Yeah.
all right, thanks.
And then I'm going to get to the municipalities part, which is, so as I understand you, Gabby. The full amount of the betterment is going to be financed by a private
Yep. a capital
lender
provider, yeah.
who's going to charge an interest factor to the, to the person, the company. Okay, and that this will stay, we will carry it as a betterment, but it won't cost us any money.
It's not gonna cost us any money.
Other than the cost of
Effectively,
administration.
yes, we're effectively the collection agent
Okay,
for the financer.
and so we will collect the money
And
as the
then remit
payments
it
and we
to
will
the
repay it.
finance.
Okay, okay. 2020 is when it was first initiated.
Yeah.
Experience with other communities in this program? How many other
Yes.
communities have, are participating? And
Yep.
what's the experience been?
There's a couple of slides on that, and I might
Okay.
hold that question. We're gonna talk about that in
Okay.
a bit more detail.
Is there a dollar limitation as to the amount of a individual company's, commercial properties benefit? As well as overall program
Yes,
limitation?
yes, there is,
You're
and
gonna get to that.
we are gonna
Okay,
get
good.
that in a little more
Okay,
detail.
Okay.
We will cover that, I
okay,
promise.
thank you.
Yeah, no, these are good questions. In terms of eligible properties, we touched on this a little bit earlier, but just to emphasize, new construction and existing buildings are eligible for this financing. So commercial industrial buildings, nonprofit buildings as well, and also multi-family housing as long as it's 5 units or more. And then we already talked about this, but eligible measures, energy efficiency, and then renewable energy measures are included as well. So in terms of key aspects for the Massachusetts PACE program, there is a municipal opt-in that's required, and that's through a select board vote, and it's required just one time. The maximum financing term that's allowed for these projects is 20 years. One thing that is important to note about this is that for an eligible project, the energy cost savings of that project must exceed the cost of improvements, and that's including any financing costs and associated fees. So there's actually no set minimum, so there's no set maximum financing cost. But because of this provision that the cost savings have to exceed the cost of improvements, that has been identified by some businesses as a barrier to participation in the program because some of these measures are quite expensive.
It's gotta be a projection, right? Energy.
Yes, a projection, yes. And again, we talked about this, but if a property was sold, the remaining PACE assessment, and that lien does stay with the property and it's transferred to the next owner. There is an option for retroactive consideration for installed improvements. And then,
How far back is that retroactive consideration?
I can double check that actually. I'm not sure. I can look at that. That was a new addition with the 2023 legislation.
And again, I
So
look
let
at
me-
this and say, this seems like a good way, it holds us
Yeah,
harmless.
it feels like a no-brainer.
Exactly.
Oh, and I did mention, so there's an ongoing RFI for capital providers, and there are 17 right now that are listed on Mass Development's registry, so there's 17 options for capital providers. So the PACE application does have to be approved by both DOER and Mass Development in order for that financing to close. And mortgage holders do have to provide written consent. So that betterment assessment is gonna be placed at closing. Mass Development General Counsel is responsible for doing all closing documents. They handle Registry of Deeds recording. So the lien gets assigned to the municipality, then it goes to Mass Development, and then ultimately goes to the capital provider. So we're kind of a pass through in those steps. The capital provider is the one that holds enforcement rights to pursue any enforcement that's required, if there's any issues with payment.
At what point does the municipality get, do we, so PACE must be approved. When do we, the town of Needham, get apprised that the application, are we there at the application point?
We're there right from the beginning,
from the
once,
beginning.
yeah,
Okay, so that I just want to make sure, obviously, that part of this, if we have a commercial property owner that say is we'll say, in arrears of, either personal property taxes or real estate taxes, they would not be eligible. Or we could look at them and say, well, wait a second,
Yeah.
you need to, you need to be up to date in
Yeah.
order for this,
Well,
so that should
It would
be
seem to me that they'd have to be in good standing.
in order for the capital.
To get the money
lender, from the lender, okay.
That would be correct. And because the municipal charges taxes priority one, town liens priority two, PACE is priority three, because those have to be paid before the PACE. They have to be in good standing at the time they get to finance.
Thank you. Okay, yeah, we haven't even woken up yet.
Oh, no, no, these are great questions. I appreciate it. So in terms of the municipal role in the PACE program, so typically the treasurer, the tax collector, or the assessor in a community is their primary municipal contact for mass development. And so they're responsible for adding an assessment to the property owner's tax bill, and then that gets remitted to mass development. And then to the capital provider. The betterment assessment does have to align with our local tax cycle. So we're talking more before with David about how we're on a quarterly schedule right now. Mass development has assigned community cap to help municipalities with that process and make sure we're getting the support that is needed. The lien gets assigned to the lender, so the municipality is not involved in any default enforcement or collection process. And again, as we were saying, municipality is always first in line, so if there are any issues with repayment, municipal taxes, property taxes, for example, would always come first before PACE. It's also recommended that economic development staff are involved with the program to let commercial and industrial property owners know that this is an option. So in terms of municipalities that have opted into PACE, the slide is actually wrong. I actually double checked this morning, and it's now 77 communities. Bedford and Somerset joined recently, so now they're up to 77. However, one thing that's important to note about this program, and gets to your earlier question, is the number of projects that have been using this program to date. Even though the program was passed in 2020, there's actually only 3 properties that have taken advantage of it so far. 2 properties in Boston and 1 in Greenfield. There have been some program barriers identified. That's why legislation was passed in 2023. It's anticipated that there may be additional legislation explored in the future to try to make this a more attractive program for property owners. Some identified issues from talking with businesses is that PACE lenders are usually smaller and their interest rates tend to be higher, so that's a barrier. While there's no statutory minimum financing amount, mass development does recommend 250,000 as the minimum, so because of that recommendation, smaller businesses might view this as attractive. And then finally, what we were talking about before, the cost savings for a project do have to exceed the cost of improvements. So that in itself could be a barrier, knowing that some of these projects are quite costly and the savings might not be made back within that 20-year financing period.
And one question for Chip is the amount of the betterment would get as a value added to the property. Assessed value, that would increase the assessed value of the property, because it's a betterment to the property.
I don't believe it's legal to add things like that to the value, like solar panels, we can't add them
Okay,
to the value of the property. Other improvements we might be able to, I don't know, all I
You're
think of when I look at this.
improving the property.
You are, but people with solar panels were given an exemption
Okay,
to encourage people to do it.
yeah,
Whether that's still in effect, I'm not sure, and whether other things that might be part of this program would add value, I don't know. I assume the legislature would say, you know, if we're saving the environment, we're not gonna charge it for it, which is, I guess, the philosophy behind solar panel, you know, or not being
I guess I'd
charged.
be more interested in.
It's a carrot.
Yeah, I hear you.
Yes, I do not see it generating new growth revenue. It certainly may add market value.
Which
to the
will then
extent-
result when the subsequent sale takes place, which then can't be.
We're getting an extra
I hate to say
million
it,
bucks.
it's
because
like
of
a
our-
pool, it's considered a detriment. Generally speaking,
Well,
One man's
well,
trash is another man's treasure.
yeah, I mean, somebody will like it, but
And
not
of course, the
everybody.
building codes where non-fossil fuel options for construction make something like this accessible. It's gonna be a limited market, but those entities that may not be able to finance those improvements on their own, this is what this is truly geared to.
Yeah.
Are there any federal or state tax breaks for companies that invest in this type of thing?
Yes,
So that may be
absolutely.
where
Yeah,
the added value comes from.
But
So-
the company still has to qualify for the loan.
Oh, yeah, but I mean,
So it's like.
once it's all done,
Mhm.
solar panels are on the roof. What do they get from federal and state taxes as bonuses? But there's something out there.
Mike,
Okay.
So an example of nonprofits,
Mhm.
would a church be able to access this, or would the Needham History Center be able to access this? You did say nonprofits.
yeah, I believe that they would be eligible, but I will double check
Yeah.
that just to make sure.
Because prior to this, you could not get the tax credit if you were a nonprofit or a commercial.
The federal tax credit.
Yes,
Yeah, that landscape has thankfully changed a little bit with elective pay, but I will just double check that for those specific building types to make sure they're included in their definition of nonprofit.
Okay, great, thank you.
continue with your 3-hour presentation.
Okay, no, you're good, we're actually nearing the end,
No, we don't want
just,
to.
just the last slide. So why is this something that we're bringing up for Needham? It's another tool in the toolbox, when we think about sustainability measures and trying to meet our net zero emissions goals, supporting local businesses as they try to make these improvements to reduce energy consumption. It's another way to incentivize businesses in Needham as they look to identify sustainability measures that will not only reduce their energy costs, but also help them on that track to becoming net zero. This in particular, the adoption of PACE was identified in our climate action roadmap as a high priority. That roadmap was adopted in June of this year. And then the other piece is that the state climate leader communities program, which is kind of the 2.0 of green communities, which Needham is already a part of, has identified adoption of PACE as a best practice that is encouraged for municipalities.
So let me just jump in and just say, so 75 communities have joined the program, yet you've indicated only
Only
3
3.
projects have been done, and 2 of those
Two are
were.
related.
But that
are
doesn't
related,
mean
And they're in Boston.
that they haven't been applied for, you're just saying 2 have closed.
Yeah, so three programs have been fully implemented.
But it's a 4-year-old program.
It's a
already.
new program.
Yeah, but a
Oh,
lot of
sorry,
this
sorry,
stuff, just
um,
engineering takes forever.
Three programs have applied and been accepted and are in the process of paying into their betterment assessments. I have asked other municipalities who've opted into the program, are you getting interest? Like, where's the pushback? And I think I got 6 communities who said that they were having conversations with property owners who were interested in the program, trying to learn if they could craft a proposal that would be eligible. But the barriers that I mentioned on that prior slide about cost savings being greater than the improvement costs and that $250,000 suggested minimum for mass development, those have been identified as barriers. That and the fact that the interest rates, just like haven't been as favorable from
You
these
mentioned
17
boutique
capital
lenders
providers.
that are going to, in
Yeah.
essence, charge higher
Yeah.
interest rates, so we're already right now at a higher point.
Yes.
Mike,
Can we just go back to that? There was like a second slide. What, if you're at the last slide, let's go back to the pro con slide.
Was it the barriers?
No, the
Or-
pro con. The title page or the second one. I just wanna. now that I understand it a little better.
Oh,
There we
benefits,
go.
this one.
I just a friendly suggestion would be, I mean, I think it might be useful to start out with, here's how normally you would do this. And here's how you would do it here. And here are the differences and why you might want to do it this way, but I just want to take another look at this now. Cause it sounds like the debt on the balance sheet would seem like potentially one of those things, how it runs with the property instead of running with the business. And
Yeah, but if
no
the property is
no
owned by the
acceleration.
business, but if the property is owned by the business, the debt's gonna show up. on the
Yeah, and also
balance
no
sheet.
acceleration, so if they have trouble paying it, they don't get the whole note called.
Correct. It's not the same thing as a traditional
Yeah.
loan. It's just like you don't show on the balance sheet, the betterment, a sewer betterment assessment. It's something to pay, but it's also transferable. Whereas a traditional loan, if you were to sell the property, for instance, you have to settle up on the loan.
Yeah.
But it's still an obligation, it's still a debt, it's still money that has to be paid.
Sure.
So from any sort of income and expense projection, it's got to be shown as a cash flow item.
It makes sense, but to the extent that one shows what a sewer betterment is on their balance sheet, it's one step removed. Which,
And presumably, if you go to apply for these companies that might enter this program, go to apply for, just a working capital loan, they're gonna have to disclose that this is part of their ongoing income and expense. So that's part of their ability to pay. Now, the assumption is that the offset is the cost savings from the energy, but that may be a longer term. It may not be consistent with the same 20-year.
true, but
Yeah.
again, to the extent that you're applying for the loan, to the extent the taxes come into play anyway for municipal charges. I just don't recall any business carrying on their balance sheet property taxes unless they're in the arrears or sewer betterments or water. and
Well, they
sewer.
would carry property taxes if the business owns the real estate. And if you see, we're assuming here that the real estate is separate entity than the business that lives in that or does business out of that property. There are many businesses that own the property that they're in. In case they're going to show all of the costs associated with the building and operating of the building that on their.
As an operating
As an
expense.
operating expense, right?
But what I'm saying is on the balance sheet, I do not think that they show it as a liability on the balance sheet for the business, not a liability of the community itself. And just as betterments are transferable, these are designed, hence why it's referred to as a betterment. It is transferable to, if you were to sell the building to the next entity. It's a subtle distinction, but it is a distinction. And the most importantly is, of course, if you do traditional financing, if you're selling the building, of course, you need to settle up in order to transfer the property. Here, the law itself says that the betterment transfers. Now, of course, between buyer and seller, that's going to be taken into account in terms of settlement, but it's not a barrier. It's not a barrier for, let's say, your your line of credit, for instance.
But now let me turn to Chip and just say, Chip, so in the case of getting back to the assessment thereof with these properties, we apply income and expense to determine assess values. So the betterment, the whatever the payment is for the betterment wouldn't be included as part of the expense.
I would think not, since, again.
It's sort
probably
of
gonna
just
be
disappearing, right? It's not
Protected as a
correct.
save the earth.
Right, right. So it's going to be, so in essence, the benefit that we could ultimately come away with is that the way we do commercial property assessments is that they take into account income and expenses. And if the expense isn't shown, it will show basically a higher income because the betterment isn't taken into account on the.
Well, it'll show low expenses, it won't show high.
It'll show with lower expenses, which in turn
Higher net income.
shows higher net income.
Why wouldn't this be included?
Because
Expense? I mean, it's a regular expense.
right, but I guess there are elements of the law that don't allow it to be.
I
considered.
don't know, all I know is solar panels.
Okay,
Again, these take into
Yeah, there'll
count
be
other,
things.
other types of, yeah, geothermal.
Right, Jill, right,
Which
right.
I don't think you get.
Well, basically, we're gonna be getting there at some point, maybe, but clearly the
Yeah.
experience from the 75 communities is that nobody's applying for these things.
I'm just curious as to why the bigger lenders shy away from this.
To be honest, I'm not sure. I'm happy to bring that question back to Mass Development though, and ask them if they have any feedback from them on that.
I mean, the level of security is tremendous, you know, you can't beat it, that's better.
Yeah, it seems like
Yeah.
they're more, in some ways, I guess they can't call the thing, but otherwise, aren't they better protected?
Right. Right,
One takes a priority over a traditional loan.
Yeah, yeah, so it seemed if anything, we're
right,
slightly in a better position. And then as far as the town goes, we would be, like you said, like a collection agency, but it would just be a pass through
It would be.
with a extremely small overhead on our part, but
Correct. It's more in terms of the community trying to reach its climate action goals and fostering encouraging local commercial and not-for-profit organizations to move to green energy sooner rather than later. So that's where the public good comes into play.
right.
So we don't charge any overhead fee.
And no, we're not allowed.
Okay.
That's why it has to be adopted by the board.
Yeah, that makes sense.
okay. Any other questions? Gabby, you have any other, more slides?
No, I don't have any more slides. So I just want to make sure, so in terms of questions I have to run by Mass Development. Question about the time period for the retroactive consideration of improvements. Confirming that churches and, is it a historic
Charitable organizations.
charitable organizations?
It's like nonprofits.
Well, that's
Just
different.
ask what their
So I
definition
guess
is
what
for
would
that.
happen, that these are entities that don't pay taxes now, right? Or at least.
Well,
in most
nonprofits
cases.
can pay taxes.
But I guess it depends on, yeah,
Right.
depends on Indiana.
I've gone through this whole thing.
Well, I don't know, like with.
So I would ask the question,
let's say like,
churches or
Mhm.
religious organizations, nonprofits, and charitable organizations.
Well,
A charitable organization is a
Agencies are
nonprofit.
not eligible.
okay, but like, if a
Yeah.
church has a daycare and then they pay, like if they have a daycare in their basement, do they pay something now?
Well, they pay commercial real estate tax,
They pay, yeah.
because there are several.
Right.
Right,
town
although
that
actually,
have-
it'd probably be
right.
residential,
Right.
if it's a daycare, it's probably.
Yeah,
residential,
if
right?
it's
But if they lease some space to a, I don't know, gift shop.
A
or whatever,
non-charitable.
Right,
Non,
right, it's
purely,
like, we had the.
Then there would be a
Columbus
report- right,
over on-
right.
yeah,
So,
over on
okay.
Island, so,
but if it was a purely. So let's say it's a church, they have no business, no nothing else, they wouldn't even appear on our roll, but they would just have to, it would just be better, it would still go through the. They would get kind of.
Well, it would be
added to
no
the-
different than if there was a sewer betterment assessed to
Oh,
a
right,
church.
yeah.
Okay.
They
sure.
would get a bill that would
Be
just be
like
the.
$0 plus $10,000 for the
Correct.
betterment, yeah.
And just the last question was asking about, why aren't larger capital providers participating in the program? Were there any other questions that you wanted me to bring back?
Oh, is the interest rate tied to any kind of index or? That seems to be kind of a loose situation right now and a constraint.
Well, if it's 17 different private ones, wouldn't they just be competing for?
I don't know. It wouldn't make sense to have a competition.
That would be good to know is how is the interest rate determined?
Yeah.
I didn't think to ask that myself.
that's probably one of the barriers. Clearly,
Yeah,
it's
it
indicated as one of
sounds
the
like it.
barriers. It's absolutely one of the
Yeah.
barriers, and it could be that the loans aren't, I don't know, maybe they're just not structured in a way that attracts the larger
Right.
lenders, they just look at it and be like,
How do we work a sewer betterment? I know the town of Falmouth. You had to go on it. And you didn't have a choice, but there was a betterment and it was low interest.
Yes, it's a low interest, the law is, if you can charge 5% or 2% above the actual cost of borrowing. The community's choice, we traditionally, though there's not, although you'll be signing something very shortly, there are not too many betterments in Needham.
maybe.
And generally it's the 5% interest.
5% above the interest rate,
No, 5%,
5%.
Or 2%.
Okay.
or 2% of the municipality's actual cost of borrowing.
Well, I'll work on these questions then with mass development, and then I'll share them with Dave and Cecilia to distribute to
And
them.
we'll see you back here in 15 minutes.
Okay.
That's the way we work.
I mean, mass development is fast, but not that fast.
Okay, okay, fine. Thanks, Gabby, appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you for the questions. Oh, yeah.
It's kind of funny.
Oh, yeah.
Normally be like a level payment or.
Yeah, appreciate
Well,
that.
in terms of how they structure, in terms of a betterment, yes, it's equal installments
Typically,
with a declining interest rate, a declining amount.
so like the way you would pay your mortgage on your house. Like flat payment.
Flat, no, not the same as a mortgage, this would be flat principal and then.
Oh, it'd be flat principal.
With
So
declining interest,
More like,
so in theory, each year it would be
more
declining,
like municipal financing.
yes.
It would seem to make sense almost to go the opposite way, but I don't know.
Yeah.
In general,
Yes,
on these, if there was a way to do that.
and perhaps that's one of the
Yes.
lack of interest. Could be the cash flow structure,
Somebody
because if
join
they're
us.
only recovering their principal,
Gonna
the
attend
lender
someone of
twice a year rather than monthly, that may be a reason.
Well, actually, when you say that, when you say that's how this would normally be. Is that under this program, or is this how commercial loans of the type like this would normally be done also?
Generally, well, depending the type of loan it is, a commercial loan that's a mortgage would be like, exactly what you describe, a level of payment. Line of credit, you're paying, whatever minimum amount of principal it's agreed that you have to pay each month, plus you're paying full interest cost.
But that's usually set over the amortization rate.
Thank you.
Expected.
Sometimes probably variable as well.
Okay. Next item on the agenda, we have a recertification update.
Yes. So. The work, by the, different firms have been done both in, real estate and personal property. Residential and, commercial properties. I don't know, was the information shared with the board yet?
No,
Yeah,
well,
that spreadsheet.
Nancy sent me the, cause I just asked for it, if there were any updates, and she sent me the commercial and industrial. One, I think it may have had a couple of other smaller categories as well. It seemed to show, over 30% increase, in commercial and industrial. Some of that, though, that's a mix of new growth and what would you call it? Native market growth. Yeah, so like the largest item on there, the largest single item was Children's Hospital. And I believe the second largest, or one of the other largest ones is the property next to the Children's Hospital, so that I guess that's coming along with it, the apartment. And the largest single increase is actually, the daycare at 1688 Central. I believe that was the largest single percentage. Again, that's a new building issue, so.
What about residential?
I think, well, I'd said that before, except I'd made some assumptions, and when you took out the things that I assumed. It came out, it was in the 23%, I believe, average across the board, but again, that's conflating some new growth and some market growth. And in this case, I didn't back out anything, so the 30 something, basically, the total, I'm going off of memory here, was something like 1.6 billion up to 2.3 billion, somewhere in that ballpark. That came out to something like 35% overall. But again, that's a mix of, so that, let's say it's 700 million. I know right off the top that at least 60 million of that is new growth. So how much of that is market, and how much that's new, I don't know. But I'm sure that'll be something that's being calculated out, so.
The thing is we have to, DOR won't look at this until the board's comfortable with sending the information.
Can we get the information sent to us?
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Should already have been sent.
Okay.
Confess, I have not looked at I didn't look at.
I did have a
Office account
conversation.
as of this I didn't look at it. I was away for the weekend and I haven't looked at it since about Thursday or something.
Okay, so we'll get as the DO wanting to see,
The DOR wants the board
to look at.
to look at and bless the values that are being set to them.
Which is,
It makes
makes
sense.
sense.
Yes, of course,
Yeah.
and similar to, I too have been looking at the data, the different, the different updates that have come, that saw some oddities, which I had asked questions of Tyler. And the consultant that we hired, to look over Tyler's information. Generally, it's good, where the big increases were, where we were anticipating, the changes in land values. Certainly was one of the major drivers. And again, and this gets back to why DOR wants the boards to bless this. As like I had asked questions, I saw some significant increases and some significant decreases in the data, and I had asked questions. There was one property, the 0 Chestnut Street, that it was just driving me nuts, because when you look at that on Google, it's a traffic light. And it went from $100 to like $2.1 million.
Makes sense to me.
One I learned,
Light, yeah.
yes, one I learned that 0 does not mean it's the beginning of the road.
Right, right. No, I knew that part.
Yes, and the second was that, we, of course, understand our property better than the consultants did. All they saw was this as a property was deemed as developable, but it is this N-Star substation transfer, which is not developable.
Yeah,
And therefore, once they understood that and then described the description, the value came down significantly.
Right. So is that also something that the assessor's office is looking at? Just they're just doing a sanity check on these and just looking for any anomalies or
Correct.
things
And
that seem up, okay.
yes,
Is it better for us individually to come into the office and sit down with, with staff to,
I kind of did that before, but I
Okay.
actually just found it easier just to have it emailed to me.
okay, so let's start with emailing
Skim
it,
through
you
the-
can get that to us. And
well,
then,
that today.
and then if
So-
there's any other questions, we'll,
Will it go through a first pass filter before it comes to us?
Oh, yeah, I would say that we've been through a couple past filters already.
Okay,
And again, as Mr. Diener had mentioned, he's been looking at the data. In fact, I had my conversation with the Department of Revenue. I had mentioned some of the work that he himself has done in terms of the grid and looking at the quartiles in terms of residential values, and they were pleased to hear that the board had an understanding of that concept. Because in the end, people, some properties are gonna go up greater than the median and some
Right.
properties are gonna go below the median.
Yeah.
And it's a disproportionate number are gonna be the smaller lots are seeing the greater increases because that's where the appreciation has been in the marketplace. So then it's reflective of what's been happening in the marketplace.
I think also some of that could be the fact that if it's a relatively newish tear down, you would have the data would be more current. But let's say, so if they like that, they'll like, I didn't bring a copy for everybody, but I just wanted to just give a summary, because I was kind of as a case study type of thing. I just looked at my neighborhood. We have a distinct set of 3 streets, 30 houses. And I just looked at that, the before and after. And then what I also did is I went into Zillow. And I just looked at all the Zillow values, because I assume that what they do is roughly similar. They have formulas that look at size of the property and what things go for in the area. I don't know.
it's all public information. It's all what
Yeah.
comes off of the assessors.
Right, so they probably my guess, and maybe someone knows better, but I assume that they're looking at the same kind of data. And running.
Total market
Through-
data and their
And running
cost
it through a
tables.
computer and saying, well, if this house at 1600, if this house sold for this amount of money and this house here seems to be about the same size and about the same size lot, it's probably about the same.
It doesn't take into account quality of what's inside.
Right, okay. But what I
Well, I
found,
guess it does. It's got A condition, B condition, C condition, right?
yeah, so what I found.
In-
Sorry.
In the assessor's card.
Oh, yeah, not a Zillow,
No, but
Yeah, we
Zillow
do.
feeds off of the assessor's. card.
sometimes. I mean, they do for land and building area and that type of thing, great.
Yeah,
I don't know.
Yeah,
if they-
bedrooms, all of that.
Yeah,
stuff.
I don't know if they
You
look
mean
at
the
grades.
assessors department of the town of Needham doesn't use a Zestimate?
No.
Yeah, so, but what I did was I basically took, so I put in all the Zillow values and then I, looked at the previous versus Zillow, the post versus Zillow and the change. And also ranked it in order of, prior valuation. So you go from prior valuation lowest to highest. And what you find basically is that out of these 30, and again, it's just a case, not a survey, scientific, but it's a case study. The 10 highest valued ones are all above 90% of the Zillow value. And all of the bottom 10 are still below 90% of the value. They're mostly in the 80s. So what this is suggesting to me, at least based on this one thing, is that while the lower valued properties are going up more, they're still not going up to what, at least based on Zillow's estimates, what Zillow thinks is the full valuation. So they're going up more, but they're still.
Zillow gives a range.
No, they usually just give one number.
No, they
they
also
do give a
they
range.
do give
Oh,
a
okay,
range,
but
yes.
There's estimate, that's the
All right,
flash.
I was
Right,
going
and
by
then
this
it goes
estimate.
And then then you'll see,
Yeah.
if you look down a few lines, then it gives a range.
Oh,
The
okay.
range can be probably exactly what the
Right.
assessed value will be, up to in excess of what the
Right.
number
And
is.
I think they claim their estimates are within, was it 7% if it's not on the market, 3% if it's on the market, something like that. I don't know if they're taking their whole range or if they're taking the single
I'm
number,
not
but.
sure what their matrix.
What I also did notice, just of interest, is that, at least as far as, the prior doesn't break down land and,
Right.
building, but the new does, the new proposed values are broken down. And what you can see is that the land values are basically all roughly $800,000, and the difference is all house value, which I guess makes sense. For that, so like I said, this is just like one thing to give an idea, and I think one of the things you can tell, if people don't like their valuation, one thing would be to say, well, what's your assessed value? Go online and look at the Zillow's estimate, just to give a flavor of, am I within
Might give a
Yeah.
face, yeah.
range of reason?
Yeah, I don't think we'd want to, personally, I'm not legal here, but I don't
Yeah,
think we'd want to advise anyone. Whether it's Redfin or Zillow or
Yeah.
whatever, I mean, I think you run into trouble.
We would get information out. Which we'll be working on to get the information out up on the webpage, of course, press, we'll put it out there as well.
Yeah,
And it'll be in our newsletter. The. But people know where to look at comparable, I mean, they understand.
Yeah,
like, the challenge, their assessments when their advisors look at comparable sales to your property and such, so that guidance won't be much different. And I did see the tables, they seem certainly in the commercial, highlighted the sales that have happened for all commercial properties in the last 3 years was identified there. And a lot of those proposed values seem to be fairly close. There were some that, some sales that were not correct, and I had asked questions about that. But I was not able to follow up with Tyler and myself. I don't know if Chip or Cecilia or Marie had a chance to get feedback on, but there were some values that we know, because they're all subject to ATB cases, to understand their evaluation, and they said they would look into it into greater detail.
Okay. Yeah, I did spot check a couple of properties that I had previously thought just on a gut level, just appeared to be like very low, like on Chestnut Street, like a decent sized property, and there did seem to be some fairly significant increases in some of that area, plus also in the Buckford area. It did appear that there were a lot of increases across a bunch of these properties. There's one concern I just had based on our, visit, from that property owner couple meetings ago was just that, it just seems like there's a disconnect between the income approach and what things are actually getting on the market and how to resolve that, because if it's much higher. It's a lot, let's get pushed on the businesses, which, I mean, that's the way it's supposed to be.
But, I mean, and I agree with Mike, and I'll turn to Chip and just say, yeah, we're seeing, aren't rents supposed to be somewhat reflective of market conditions? But I guess it operates in a different,
Yeah, because remember somebody's buying one of these buildings, is buying it for long-term
right,
return.
right,
Okay, so they're, I mean, if they buy the building, they do some improvements. The rent goes from 20 to 25 because of those improvements, but because they paid a lot of money for it. Doesn't mean they're gonna raise the rent, because they're, again, looking long-term. If it's a bigger building, if it's part of a real estate investment trust that's buying it, again, it's a long-term investment. So they're gonna overpay, knowing they're gonna get it back, over the course of 10, 15, 20 years.
right. And it's also going to blend into the other properties that they have within that real estate investment.
Yeah,
trust.
that
So,
could be.
you're right,
but,
and the depreciation is gonna come into play.
What I'm saying is, because they paid a lot of money for it, doesn't mean they're immediately gonna jack up the rents. Unless, of course, they're making improvements that would justify it.
Well, also,
Because
then
they
the carrying costs.
don't wanna lose the tenants.
Right, right.
Because you buy a building and jack up the rents and the tenants walk, and your fellow people in the real estate investment trust are not gonna be thrilled with their return.
Yeah.
Okay, so you'll get the information over to us
Each one of you will get an
Today.
email
Okay.
today.
Did you want to take a look at these other items before we go into executive, Dave?
That's for, basically putting on the recertification uplift.
Oh, okay.
That's a betterment installment, betterment site. Just give a backup. When the town does a road improvement project or sewer improvement project, or even water, although Needham is barely built out, very rare. We're not completely sewage in Needham, so there is time to time that we're still installing sewers. Property owners have the choice to either pay the betterment in full, or they can choose a repayment period. It's up to the property owner how long they want to go, or if they don't make a choice and it's gonna be installed, then we have to bill them over 20 years. All these individuals did elect to do betterments, and this is just the annual betterments that get committed with the third quarter bill.
The addresses, it's the same neighborhood.
Same neighborhood, same properties, and this is just the FY26 installment.
Which neighborhood is this?
This is, I believe, Gordon Walker area.
Okay.
And one other street. But these were all petition areas. Gordon Walker, they were all on septic, and they were looking at very significant costs to replace the septic tank, and they petitioned to get the sewers extended, which it was.
Is this something we need to do, or is this something you?
Oh, yeah.
It's just for informational purposes.
Information, but the board needs to sign it. It's a committee, it's like the annual commitment of the.
I see.
You want to vote,
I wasn't sure if
or we just sign it?
You can sign it, but you can, you'll actually commit it all when you vote, the night of tax classification hearing. Just take care of the paperwork early.
Okay.
What night is that again?
Well,
We'll go over the dates at the, it's probably the 17th.
yes, and that's only if we get our data to DOR this week.
This week.
Yes, otherwise.
Okay, Chip.
I'm sorry, I was looking at this when you were saying
There's
that.
something going on this week.
The full packet is ready for DOR. Tyler sent it over this morning. It's just waiting for the board to review.
Right.
But all the
But until-
documentation.
It's a full packet of what? The,
all the data that you've seen has been sent to DOR.
okay,
But DOR has already told me they're not gonna look at it until they hear the board's okay with the data that was
We
sent.
need that, to put that in, supposed to be sent to us.
All they said to me is I have to be able to say that the board is okay with the data that was presented. I asked about a vote, there's no form for the board to vote.
Okay.
Or anything, but notwithstanding that, I want you guys to look at the data, to at least understand. I know Michael is further ahead than Michael too, and John. Just so that you look at them, because in the end, you know, when people are gonna see those values through the public disclosure process, which we're gearing for the end of November, they're gonna be calling you.
Marie,
Yes.
there's a chance that I know, I'll speak for myself, will come in and see you this week, or Nancy this week, after I get that and over you for it. But, you know, likely to have questions that we probably want to come into.
Is there a primer that comes with it?
What? Excuse me, Marie?
I'll let Nancy know.
Okay,
She'll be back tomorrow.
okay.
Is there a primer that comes with it? Just,
All of the wonderful courses you took.
oh, okay.
We're experts.
Okay.
We took a course.
I've never looked at this chart though.
Yeah, like.
It's an Excel spreadsheet, lots of data, the column, it's really straightforward, you'll notice it.
This is a simplified,
What is Excel?
this thing I did, this is a simplified version
You really
of,
are.
I deleted a bunch of columns, but
You're gonna use a computer.
there's 2 pages like that. So I get just to understand the stuff. that we
Does
have.
it all the properties?
Every single parcel.
Okay.
I just want to understand though, as far as where this is in the process. So obviously it came from Tyler.
Yeah.
You've identified some things that didn't look right.
And then
One
ask
reason
them
or
to
another.
do another relook.
Yeah, so how many, where are we in that? I mean, are we at a stage where,
They
you
must,
and the assessor's office has been through it all once and gone back to them or?
yes, I've been through it a couple of times with questions. And they, Tyler went back to it, as well as the consultant that we hired, Nate Kramer, also had some questions on through the data. Generally, it's been good, it's been more like outliers, such as statistical analysis you did, I looked at it, I looked at the median as well as the average. They were fairly close to one another, the median was around 24%, and the average was 26%. Talking about residential properties, which is usually a sign that it's pretty well balanced. Yeah, yeah, there were only a few instances where there was a duplicate entries, which they corrected, was in the commercial side I picked up, there were a couple duplicate entries because property sold. Was a real estate transaction, with the property within that 3-year cycle, so it appeared twice, but they keep the most recent sale.
Okay.
Um,
Do we have a preliminary indication of new growth?
no, and that's only because I have not been here since Wednesday
Okay.
of last week. So there's a couple of questions you've asked me that I haven't got the update because
Okay.
I haven't seen anything.
Just a little pearl of information, because it excites all assessors. Whitman Road, not Whitman, Country Way just had a tear down, 1 acre, 1.8 million.
Wow. Okay.
That's a new high. I mean, 1.5, 1.6 was kind of the going rate there. So that's big.
Well, in our neighborhood, now it's a 1/4 acre. It's a house, basically, I'm on a corner, so I have a lot of things that are kind of diagonally across from me. But, the one that was torn down was 1.05, 1,050,000.
Yeah.
And then in a different direction, a house that it was also a colonial, but it had a fairly decent sized addition done 30 years ago. That was about 1.25, and that was not a tear down, so I'm guessing that at least in the 1/4 acre area, it's somewhere in that's somewhere in the break point
Yeah, if for
in
10,000
that-
square feet.
in that
I
board,
would
yeah.
agree.
But 1.8 and tear down, all right. Well, but that's an acre,
It's an acre.
set acre
Yeah.
area, yeah.
Anything else before we go into executive day?
Cecilia,
No.
Marie? Sure, anything Okay, Mr. Chair, I think you might move to an executive session.
Okay, then I'd like to move into executive session. By the provisions of a general or special law specifically to discuss real estate and personal property exemption and or abatement applications which are not open to public inspection. Comply with the provisions of any general or special law specifically to discuss returns of property held for charitable purposes which are not open to public inspection. Or to discuss strategy with respect to litigation of an open meeting may have a detrimental effect on the government's litigating position. And we will return to open session to announce the results of any vote that we have, that the board has taken. So do I have that motion?
So moved.
Second. Mike?
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Want numbers or just the fact that
There
the
you go.
abatement was granted to such and such a parcel?
Recording.
Yeah, it stayed recording.
Um.
I'm wondering we used to do just the parcel and the fact that there was an abatement or not.
Certainly, it just announced the actions. the
Yeah.
board took.
Yep.
Okay, board voted on 19 Wexford Street and an abatement was granted. And that was for fiscal year 24. Board voted on 80 B Street for fiscal year 22 and an abatement was granted. The board voted on 200 First Avenue for fiscal year 21 and an abatement was granted. Board voted on 200 First Avenue for fiscal year 22 and an abatement was granted. Board voted on 200 First Avenue for fiscal year 23 and an abatement was granted. Board voted on 238 Highland Avenue for fiscal year 23 and abatement was granted. The board voted on 238 Highland, or the board did not vote on 238 Highland Avenue for FY 24 because the ATB filing was withdrawn. The board voted on 0 Cabot Street for FY 24 and an abatement was granted. The board voted on 0 Cabot Street for FY 23 and an abatement was granted. The board did not vote on 200 First Avenue for fiscal year 24 because that ATB filing was withdrawn. Board voted on 72 A Street and an abatement was granted for fiscal 24. And the board voted on 105 Cabot Street for FY 24 and an abatement was granted.
Thanks, Chip. You're welcome. Okay, anything, any topics not reasonably anticipated? Let's discuss our future meetings.
Mr. Chair, as the board's aware, I had agreed to have a meeting on the 18th of November. With consultation with the Department of Revenue and with knowing that that we will be informing them this week that the board has reviewed the proposed new values for recertification. That it's advised that the board hold at least a couple of meetings during the public disclosure period. So that if folks want to meet with the board to discuss their proposed values, that they would be able to do that. I would recommend to the board that we have meetings scheduled for the 25th of November. And that would be a Monday.
And when will the public be made aware of the new values?
It is hoped that we will be able to run notice, legal notice on the 21st. DOR said they need a minimum best case scenario of 2 weeks to review the data. So that would be the earliest. Basically, we'll there are 5 business days continuing that the public disclosure must be available. And effectively, it works out to be 10 calendar days. So if we can start, if we're able to start on the 21st, our public disclosure would be done on December 2nd. If we cannot make the 21st, the earliest the public disclosure would begin, because public disclosure begins with that notice in the paper. that would be the 27th of November, which is a Wednesday, the day before Thanksgiving. We would be looking at, public disclosure period not ending until Monday, December 9th.
So what dates? I'm still confused. So give us the next 2 months.
So November 18th, November 25th, I know that we had discussed December 2nd
And December
and
2nd
December 6th.
and December 6th.
That's a Friday, December 6th.
Yes, thinking that if, public disclosure period was done, that the board can, is, basically so acknowledged in the meeting. I would not anticipate that meeting to be long.
Okay. And that's at, all these are at 9:15.
9:15.
Yes,
So this is when people might first see what those proposed values are. They're gonna be able to look it up through what? Through,
it's gonna be posted on the website. We'll make it available to, the newspapers, and they can publish it or put it on their website. The newsletter will point people to the town's website. I will be connecting Nate Kramer with our public information officer in order to, section off a piece of the webpage, so it'll, be easier for the public to find information. Meaning that there'll be a link directly to them.
Will we have a early estimate on what the tax rate will be? Because I think people looking at their values are going to they're going to be, concerned. But, we also want to be able to in some way say that, well, it's not the current tax rate that you will be paying on, that there'll be a reduction in the tax rate to, adjust that.
Unfortunately, until this process is done, I can't, because I can't submit the rest of the information to get DOR's preliminary approval. Because the approvals that the board is seeking is from the Bureau of Land Assessments. But I can't start talking tax rates until the Department of Revenue overall, Bureau of Accounts gives the approval.
Well, then, what makes no sense is then that for the first part of this, we're simply just gonna be scaring people. Because with the values, people are gonna look and say 20 to 30% increases in values. That means my taxes are going up 20 to 30%. I think I have no problem saying to them, no, they are not going to, but we need to give people some, we can't just say. We just can't say the world is going to end, but not tell them how the world is going to be
Correct.
saved, okay? So how do we navigate this?
That's what I gotta work on in terms of how that's crafted, because again, the state will remind you, Board of Assessors are not responsible for the tax rate. The Board of Assessors don't cause taxes. Board of Assessors' sole job is to determine fair and equitable assessments. Town meeting decides how much taxes need to be raised. Town meeting decides that. The board, the select board, is the board that decides whether there's gonna be a shifting of taxes from one group of taxpayers to another group of taxpayers. And DOR decides what the tax rate is.
right, but is it possible to? Is it possible to plug in some numbers, like a rough estimate of what we think the new growth would be? Then a rough estimate of what the residential and commercial stuff, and then to get like a ballpark that says, we think it may be somewhere between 15 and 20%.
All parks that I'm generally give, and if this was a normal year, I would say that would, our difficulty is we had the problem with water and sewer billing. So the state decide how they're gonna handle that, that revenue shortfall during FY 24. I don't know how much we're gonna have to raise on the tax rate. But we're still working with the state on that.
Okay, the tax bills may not go up anywhere.
Everything's geared for that, because if that doesn't happen, then the tax is not due until May 1st.
But like I said,
It's a difficult, this is why this this is why, DORs, getting them, or letting them know that we're ready for them to start to work on the values.
Okay, of course, there's a number of moving parts, which we understand. By the same token, if we're setting up future meetings for which there may be residents that come in that want to talk with us, I'm certainly not going to sit here and say, well, your value went up 30%, therefore your taxes are going up 30%. I'm not gonna tell people that, because that'd be wrong.
Well, it's not
information.
accurate.
Well,
It's not accurate,
we know
right,
that's not.
right.
Yeah, that's correct.
Right, so I want people to understand that when they're sitting here, that the tax rate is going to be adjusted. We just don't know exactly what it will be, but
It'll be
your assessed
adjusted
value
down.
went up 30%,
Correct?
but your taxes are not going up 30%.
The tax rate will, residential tax rate will go down.
Right.
But the assessments are going up, so your tax bill will be going up. But your tax bill may not necessarily go up, your tax bill will not go up by the same percentage that the change in the market value of the house
Right.
has changed.
I mean, I think it's a safe, it seems like, just from the numbers we've seen, it's a safe bet that it's going to be a double-digit % decrease of some kind, so,
Right.
right? So if it's 12, roughly 12, was it 12.54 or something now? I would think it would be safe to say it's at least 10% less than that, but
Be in the 11s. I would think.
yeah, but how much, I mean, how much more, we don't know, but we do know there's gonna be a fairly substantial reduction.
I mean, generally bills are going up 5 or 6% a year anyways, because of the impact of debt exclusions and such. The issue, the main issue is the shifting. To what extent that's gonna impact residential values.
Yeah.
With the commercial value changes and what that kind of shift would look like.
Right.
And that's the big unknown. If we were a single tax rate community, again, that would be much more straightforward.
Yeah,
So that's the extra moving piece.
I mean, it just looks like from year to year, the tax rate doesn't move that much, but this year, I think it's. we're
Yeah,
gonna
this
see
year
a
it will move.
Yes.
Right.
Fairly substantial.
Yeah.
amount.
So we're holding then November 18th, 25th, the 2nd and the 6th. Classification also will be, that's the 17th, I think you indicated preliminarily.
Well, that's the latest point. I know the treasurer collector would have preferred that the classification hearing happened on the 10th. But
I don't see that we can.
it does not look.
Do we
The 17th
again?
The 17th would be in a select board meeting.
Oh, at night, okay.
So this public, period, people who come in, do we actually talk about adjusting rates at that time? Or is it
If
just
they,
take
well,
input?
if they come in and say that we have something wrong,
Yeah.
I mean, they just can't say the value's too high.
Right.
They have to point that there's, again, looking at the property card,
Right,
that there's something wrong. And then the burden is on the staff to go out and do site visits.
Right.
People will have to let them in their homes. They can't, not allow them not to go into the home.
right,
So. The state would have determined that, yes, it meets the data analytics, the market conditions. The
Mhm.
fact that people may be astonished that people are paying $800,000 for a building lot, that doesn't mean that your assessment's too high.
Yeah.
It's a reflection of the marketplace. And we know the appreciation in building lots has been substantial over the last several years. And it's been such substantial, we haven't even been able to keep pace with it. So that's the other reason, if anything, is people have gotten a break.
Right.
Is that
Well, so-
their values
so
didn't jump as quickly.
So you expect, and I'm sort of, I just want to clarify, that people might come in to speak with us during these periods. And at which time, if there's a question, then we would have them set up an appointment with the office to go out and do a site visit in a very short period of time.
Correct.
Okay,
Uh,
and then that doesn't preclude them, of course, from them filing for an abatement
Oh, correct.
request in January sometime.
every single
And we
year.
will tell people that and tell people the abatement process, which again, it may be, I'm sort of wondering, is it better? I mean. I don't know how many people respond to this, but we haven't done this research in 5 years. So it's like, how many people?
Historically, it's been minimal.
Yeah, because nobody, if you're talking about people reading the paper, that's.
Yeah, I mean, we've done the public disclosure with
Yeah.
each revaluation,
Yeah,
and it's been minimal.
Yeah.
I mean, you might want to think about putting in the article, the assessor will be available, on.
Can we have office hours?
Well, Saturday from 10 to 2, whatever Saturday, and,
Well,
I mean, I don't think you'll have any people bored to death, but,
yeah,
as I said, we very rarely got
believe
inquiries.
that, but what we'll do is we will get a bump in abatement applications.
and which will be, appropriately in the spring.
Right,
Right.
right,
No, it's just this process, even the state process is so circumscribed as far as how you can do these things. So the idea that someone just kind of comes in
right,
and on short notice, it's almost like a pre-abatement
right.
type of process.
And this is the importance of, and this is why having our public information officer speak with our consultant, and putting up information explaining why values have changed and what goes into it. So basically, hopefully they answered a lot of the questions, so people know, yeah, it's clearly what's clearly is if we have something wrong, that we turn around, and we say that you have 4 bathrooms, in reality you have 2 bathrooms.
I think the big thing is gonna be when people get their tax bills.
Which is, that happens every single year, as the board is aware.
Right,
It's just a little late in the game for
Right.
public disclosure.
Right.
That can't be helped.
right. Yeah,
You're not gonna be able to-
back at the year, it's only gonna be.
Yeah, I mean, the only thing you're gonna make a change is if one year we had somebody put an extra 0 on a condominium, so it went from $1 million to 10 million. I mean, it was just a simple mistake,
Yeah.
but it's the kind of thing, okay, we gotta fix that right now.
That's a fix, yeah.
Right, right, so something.
See that?
Yeah.
And that's exactly what the board.
Oh, okay, I'm sorry.
And just to make it clear, that's, what staff is gonna get, because they're gonna call them staff first.
Right.
And obviously, if there is a, obvious error, clerical, an extra 0, staff is gonna notice that immediately,
Right,
and
right.
that's gonna be something which we would update the board about.
Could I get a motion to adjourn?
Can I just,
Wait, go ahead.
I just wanna check that you all have access to Gateway and you can get in?
And to look at.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, but you.
Oh, I've never looked
Wait,
at the
gateway to
individual.
what?
This is where all the information is gonna end up.
Wait, at our camera or?
No, this is the state
The state,
gateway.
yeah, no,
They're gonna need access to that.
Oh, no, we
Well,
have.
we all have
We have
access.
that.
No,
But you
but we don't have access to everything that's in Gateway.
Or you
So,
could get it to work, is what I mean.
I don't know that answer.
Okay, I would
I
check,
guess we should check.
because you're gonna need to get on there. You can also find some interesting information. If you're looking for values, a summation,
Oh, yeah, I know how to get the L3s and
LA3, LA4.
L4s, yeah. those
Okay,
different
so you
forms.
can get there. I just,
I've seen those.
because
yeah.
we had one year where we were in my office the night of the classification hearing, getting people signed up
Yeah.
for Gateway with somebody from the DOR happened to be there at
Right.
6:30.
Well, one of my plans for this week was to try to get our last couple of years, see if I can see if I can go from one year to the next and get the tax rate to come out. And then I'll feel like I know how that works.
The math is easy.
Yeah,
in the split. And as I said, it's just this curveball this year because of the water and sewer issue. So that's really what that's the hang up. Now, I can definitely give a range. What I don't want to say is if I say the rate's gonna be 11.50, I want to say, well, the rate's gonna be 11.50.
No, I just think if we can say, our best guess is that the range is gonna be somewhere between, 11 and 11.25, or whatever would be a fairly safe range. And then tell people you can multiply it out and figure out what that means for you.
The
I
other
mean,
thing that we
I
can
help
do
you.
is
Okay,
describe what the
understand.
tax bill is. What the other thing I will be able to show is what the average tax bill is.
Yeah.
So if the average assessed value is this, now the average assessed value is that. This was the average tax bill in 2024. This is preliminarily what the average tax bill is in 25. That information we'll have, and you'll see what that percentage. We will also know how much the total tax levy is growing by. So, but when you get into John Smith's specific property, I can't tell you that until we know what the final values are. The final values won't be known until the public disclosure period has ended.
Right. Can we make a request as a board to see whatever the public information officer is gonna send out prior to it goes out? And we will turn it around.
That's not a good idea.
So, but don't need a response because it's so tight, because
Yeah.
we're not,
Yeah, that's what I'm
we're
saying.
not allowed to do anything till DOR says. I need to get a legal notice, so I have to take a gamble that we can make the 21st. I have to send that legal notice to the newspaper on Friday. And Friday the 5th.
So when can he or she get us the notice by?
I can,
Maybe they just give us a heads up, it'll be here by such and such, and we'll be on the lookout.
yeah, again, I gotta connect with everybody.
Yeah.
Being out, this was a bad week for me to be at home, last week, so that's. So there's a lot of conversations I have not been able to hold.
Okay.
Okay, motion to adjourn,
So moved.
Second.
all in favor?
Aye. Thank you, guys.